And we've had a lot of dark days in our industry, but like now we have the certainty and our industry is back.
Welcome to the Solar Disruption Theory podcast. Today we've got a special episode. It feels like every episode recently has been a special episode, but today we've got some breaking news. So we wanted to bring it to you first and foremost. My name is Chad Towner. I'm the CRO of Freedom Forever. And with us today, we've got Brett Bushy. And we also have clarity on the executive order from the big, beautiful bill. So first things first, Brett, how are you feeling after having a little bit of time, a couple hours to digest the executive order that everybody's been kind of waiting on since July 7th?
Phenomenal. This was the last piece of uncertainty that was out there. And I feel like for the first time since the election and since the day we knew the House, the Senate, and the presidency went Republican, we finally have certainty, which our industry desperately needs. We've had just so much uncertainty over that last 9 months. It's incredible to get it. And with the executive order and the way that it was written and the aggressive tone that it was written with, and then you see what actually came out of the Treasury, which is essentially allows you to safe harbor projects till 2030. The commencement of construction percentage, which was rumored to go up, did not go up. It's still 5%. It allows no changes in the physical work test. And the companies that have done a significant amount of safe harboring, finance companies like Sunrun, like Everbright, like Goodleap, and like Enfin are the massive winners here, because all four of those companies went out and did a ton of safe harbor with risk. There was a concern that the safe harbor, they would make changes and make it retroactive. So imagine tying up hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion in safe harbor, not knowing if you could even use it. It's a calculated risk. And companies like Sunrun, Goodleap, Enfin, and Everbright did that. Some of them did transactions in late 24, right after the election. Some did them on April 15th, right before the change on percentages for domestic content. There was some that was done when the bill was being negotiated between like April and July 4th. There's even been some done, and one closed this week, which was a massive one. And that got done. All of that is going to be incredible for our industry, which we need like liquidity where people want to buy residential solar assets. And this is the certainty that we needed. And we've had a lot of dark days in our industry, but like now we have the certainty and our industry is back.
Well, I mean, that's amazing and sounds very exciting, but it feels like the mentality of we're back, we got certainty, this feels amazing, is kind of taking it all into context within where we are today. Like the big, beautiful bill still effectively killed solar in a shorter runway than what the Inflation Reduction Act had. But considering within those parameters, you're feeling good about it. Is that a better way to put it?
Correct. If you assume that the four finance companies that I mentioned safe harbored enough equipment, what we did is there was uncertainty with the big, beautiful bill if there was no safe harbor, then the tax credits on TPO for PV only would have ended in 27. Now, if you assume that they safe harbored enough equipment, you can go all the way to the end of 2030 with PV only. But remember, we always have had batteries. Batteries have not changed. Storage had not changed. So we did have the runway all the way to 2032 with batteries. So this is the best case scenario. And the big, beautiful bill said, hey, we have tax credits through at least 27, but it might end at the end of 27. Now this gives us certainty through 2030 with the caveat, you have to safe harbor enough equipment to get there. And so, and there is one finance company that we don't think has done any safe harboring, which is a massive mistake. The good news for that company is they do have a few more months to safe harbor equipment. And so they're going to need to do that to be competitive. Otherwise, you become irrelevant without safe harbor in years 2028, 29, and 2030.
All right, so let's break this down because that's a term that I had never heard until the first supply chain shortage that happened in 2021. What is the safe harbor strategy, and what is it about this bill or the executive order that has preserved that the 5%? So, what is safe harboring, and what is this 5% that people have been worried about?
All right, so there's two different ways to safe harbor. All right, the first one is the 5% commencement of construction. That means you have to get 5% of the fair market value of that project and you have to purchase it. And if you do that and you put it into physical inventory somewhere, whatever you have, that gives you the ability to literally safe harbor those projects for 4 years. We have up until the end of the year to do it. So at the end of the year, you can do it on December 31st, 2025. That gives you 26, 27, 28, 29, in a lot of cases, 2030. That is one way to do it. But to give you kind of an example, if you can safe harbor $300 million worth of equipment, that gives you a runway of $6 billion of projects. So, and those are real numbers. And so for a finance company, $6 billion of projects, is that enough for them to last for 4 years? And the reality is, like at Freedom, we're going to do well over $1 billion of TPO products ourselves. All right. But we're the largest. So I think we need about 4 billion, 5 billion in residential TPOs a year to handle the entire industry. Maybe more than that. And that's what really nobody knows. So the one thing that you have to figure out is, what are you going to need for 4 years?
All right. So, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but for somebody who's new to solar, safe harboring, you get access to these adders or these tax credits that came with the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And you get it as if it's like retroactively taking advantage of these tax credits that in the future will not be available. Right?
Yeah,
that's
yes. And whenever you do the purchase, it's whatever the rules are of at that date. So when you're doing commencement of construction, when you did it at the end of 2024, you only needed a 40% threshold of domestic content. If you did safe harboring yesterday, you needed 45%, because in the big beautiful bill on June 15th, the percentage changed from 40 to 45%, which has been incredibly disruptive to our industry, which I'll explain in a second. But on January 1, that percentage goes to 50%. And really, the only way to get there at 50% is you need to have cells. Let me break down why it was so disruptive on June 15th when they made that change retroactively. What it simply did is, going from 40 to 45%, you could get to a maximum of 44.4% with inverters and racking. But you couldn't get above that unless you got 0.6% from modules. Now that sounds easy. The problem is today there's essentially only one module that can get you 0.6%. That is Q-Cell. That is why Q-Cell is so important over the next few months. Like the safe harbor that happened last week on commencement of construction, it had to be Q-Cell. You have to safe harbor inverters and Q-Cells to be able to get to the 45%. Another reason why Q-Cell is so important is that you need to get, on January 1, you have to use cells. And if you use cells, you can get all the way to like 7 to 15%. And that gets you over the 50% threshold. And Q-Cell is so far ahead of everyone, even though they're having issues, all right, with the CBP, which is like the Customs and Border Patrol, all right? It came out about a week and a half ago that they had cells that were stopped at the port. That has created a massive shortage of Q-cell modules today. So if you can get your hands on Q-cell modules, people will do whatever. It is like gold. It is literally like gold mining right now, because all of a sudden they're manufacturing so much every single month and there still wasn't enough. Now without cells, they're going to have to stop production until they get released by the CBP. And we expect that to happen. The South Korean government is involved. You will see, like, they didn't use, like, everybody does not believe they use Chinese products, but sometimes they can sit at CBP for 6 months. They've already been sitting there for 2 months. So the quicker that gets released, the quicker that disruption will end. But we are going to enter a period of the next 8 to 12 weeks where most people are not even going to be able to install domestic content themselves unless it's with a safe harbor program. So every installer is trying to scramble to get into these limited safe harbor programs, or they're going to have to install with non-domestic content, which you're going to have to live with 60, 70, 80 cents worse of either no rebate the installer is getting, because most companies are getting rebates. A company like GoodLeap pays you 2 different EPCs based on whether you're getting domestic content or not. And the difference, depending on which state you can be, is 65 cents a watt to $1.20 a watt. So it's imperative that you as an installer have access to one of these programs, or access to Q cells right now, which is really hard to get.
And so the big fear, because, we've got amazing relationships with all the companies you've mentioned. We do a ton of volume. We do a ton of business with these companies. And so why was everybody so concerned about what was going to come out of this executive order? Most executive orders in the past, they're like forward looking, right? They're prospective in nature. They don't really change anything in the past. Why was everybody concerned about this executive order this time around?
Because of the inconsistent nature of the Trump administration. So all executive orders are prospective in nature, but everybody's like, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're talking about a president who didn't like the labor numbers that came out. And so the guy that came up with the statistics got fired, and now there's a new person in there. Like, it's just a new era. I don't know a time in my lifetime, I'm 56 years old, that it's so uncertain and we don't know what's going to happen. But the uncertainty, that the chaos that he brings to business is very, very difficult to operate in. And I'm just thankful that we don't have to deal with the chaos anymore, but we had to deal with it for 9 months, and it was significant. And I mean, you look at the headstones during the time of the period, like Mosaic, Sonova, SunPower was prior to the administration, but I think Sonova and Mosaic's failures are directly attributable to the uncertainty around residential solar and our administration.
Yeah, and I remember the night of the election, the day after, talking to you, and you kind of saw a lot of this chaos coming, it seemed like, at the time. But now that we have what we would call certainty, historically, you've kind of been a little bit bearish on solar overall across the U.S., right? The last year, you predicted that we would be down year over year. So now that we have this certainty, has that changed your mindset, your outlook on solar? If so, how much?
It's definitely more positive, because the key to our industry is the big buyers of residential solar assets. It's not Sunrun, it's not GoodLeap, it's the Blackstones, the BlackRocks, the Apollos. Those are the companies that are actually buying the securitizations in the ABS market, which is asset-backed security market. Those are the people that we need. We want them to have an appetite. And it has been a rough year for securitizations. That is going to change. And one of the things that we've all had to live with is, like, everybody is concerned. Everyone has had limited capital because of the lack of securitizations, all the finance companies. So just cash is really, really difficult in today's market. And so that will change, which will help us. But I still expect, after a 32% down year last year, I still expect a reduction this year. But prior to this executive order and prior to the bill, I thought it could be as much as 50, 60, 70% down. I now only think it's going to be down 15 to 20%, but that is a big, big number. And I think in 26, it's not going to be as challenging, but we're going to lose the tax credits on cash and loan. Theoretically, that should just convert to the TPO market, but I just don't know. There's a lot of small to medium sized installers that literally predominantly just sell cash and loan. And it just doesn't make sense in 95% of the scenarios without the tax credit on cash and loan. Maybe in California a little bit, but why would you ever buy it without a tax credit in California when you can get a blended tax credit of 46%? And again, I don't want to lose people on percentages, but if you like listen to Sunrun's publicly traded like quarterly calls, the blended rate is not just the 30%. The TPOs are getting 10% on some of the projects that are in low income, 10% on projects that are in energy communities, which are about 40% of all the installs, and on domestic content. Up until June 15th, they were getting the full 10% on domestic content on most projects. But on June 16th, that number dropped from 90% down to 30% because of that increase from 40 to 45%. So the winners are the finance companies that safe harbored and QCell. All right. QCell is unequivocally the winner. Their bet of the $3 billion investment in the US, everybody was questioning whether that was a good investment a month ago, 2 months ago. Now, obviously, it's a huge win for them. And I know there's been a lot of like issues around NFIN for a variety of different reasons. For everybody that doesn't know, NFIN is owned by QCell. QCell is owned by Hanwha. Hanwha is a multi-billion-dollar company that does almost everything in South Korea. They might be one of the largest companies in South Korea, and they might be the largest. The reason I bring that up is that they made this bold bet, and that's why they're ahead of someone else. So if you're out there and you're a sales rep, and you're mad at NFIN, get over it, because you're going to be selling QCell for the next 5 or 6 months. And if you don't, you're going to be selling an inferior product and get paid a lot less because you don't have QCells. Everybody needs to have QCells. They are the big winner.
All right. So, and that's the only manufacturing company that has enough domestically produced materials for the next, several months. So what happens after that when it steps up to 50% on January 1 of 2026? Do we think that other manufacturers by then will have stood up their own domestically based manufacturing plants? Like, why is this a short-term win? And how do other companies catch up and become more competitive in this landscape?
Yeah, there's another company, OCI Solar, that has cells. They are being detained by the CBP also. So they're in the same boat as QCells. We don't think QCell was targeted. You need to get those cells released and into the US. And not only do you need to manufacture them, then you also need to get reliance letters for the capital providers to take this tax credit. It's not as simple as just being able to manufacture it. You then have to get the appropriate letters, and that sometimes can mean auditors going into the factory. You have to do whatever it takes to make the finance company comfortable, who then will sell it in the ABS market. So essentially, like NFIN, who does a lot of work with Blackstone, is going to work with Blackstone to make sure the reliance letter is acceptable on this new manufacturing plant in December of 25. But when I say short term, I mean like 2.5 to 6 months. It might be the full 6 months, but what can happen is if you can't get to 50%, what that would force a lot of the finance companies to do, what would they do? They would pull from their safe harbor. They don't want to pull from their safe harbor until 28. But if you don't have this solution figured out and you can't get Q cells and there's a limited amount of them, then you start using safe harbor equipment on January 1, 26. That's why it's imperative to align yourself with a finance company that has safe harbored equipment.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah, it's like almost like this safe harbored equipment that it's like grandfathered in to 2024 or 2025 credits and terms all the way into 28 or 29, like a savings account, but you have to dip into that savings if you don't have it, if you don't have access to the Q Cells modules today.
Yeah, and we've heard people say like, hey, we're going to operate without like Q cell modules with non-domestic content and we're going to be fine. All right. That's an idiotic statement. That's just, they're not going to be fine. They will be irrelevant. They cannot do it. Like there's too much money in domestic content and almost everybody can get it through either Q cells or safe harbored equipment. So anybody that says it to you, run.
Well, yeah, I mean that's been the last several months of solar is people will just say whatever they want, right? So going forward, you feel like we've got the certainty that investors need. I think solar, it's no secret, solar has had one of its roughest, if not the roughest summer in its very up and down history. So now moving forward, I think a lot of like salespeople are looking at solar like, man, that is a roller coaster. That is very difficult to navigate. You now believe that the appetite for these projects, the appetite to buy solar finance products is going to come back. How long does it take for it to bounce back? How long before we start seeing these big improvements? Because I think a lot of sales teams are wondering like, man, should I go and focus on selling something that's a lot more like, immediate, same day, other products that you can either install or service by the time you leave the house versus the solar, up and down and dealing with these long cycle times and uncertain cash flows and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to each individual. To me, the unit economics in solar has never been better. And as long as you have cash in the bank and you are good at budgeting your money, it should not be an issue. The reality is a lot of people, though, do go out in the summer and they go out in the summer and they got a few $100s in their bank account. Like, I think those people shouldn't be going out for the summer. Like, it is not going to change quick enough. It's going to be months before you see things get back to a semi-normal state. And I'm not sure they'll ever get back to the way they once were. And I think it swung where it was too easy to get money. Now I think it's too hard to get money. And I think it will swing back to somewhere in the middle. And so we'll have to see what that is before next summer. But this was very bad timing for like summer teams. Like, I want to be the first one to say that. It doesn't matter where you're at. We went out, and if you guys remember, like April, May, a lot of people going out for the summer. It's exciting. And then all of a sudden the bill happened. All right. It comes out of the House Ways and Means Committee. Then all of a sudden you've got Sonova in trouble. Mosaic is in trouble. They both filed bankruptcy within a business day of each other. And all of a sudden just everything changed. And literally now we're getting certainty. The summer's pretty much over. It's August 15th. So timing wise for summer, it was bad, but I hope that we look back, 10 years from now and say, gosh, remember that was a crazy time, but look at where our industry is today. I do think it's going to take months for our industry to heal. And I think there's still going to be more casualties, and it is hard to operate in it. And I just want to shout out and there's some just really smart people within our industry that have done a great job and bet on safe harboring and has made our industry more stable because of it. Mary Powell and Paul Dixon at Sunrun did an amazing job. They did an amazing job in Washington, D.C. They worked tirelessly behind the scenes, and they did a great job in safe harboring. They even came out and said at their second quarter call that, hey, they're going to have equipment for the next 3 years. You got Paul Steffen, Hayes, and Matt Dawson, and the guys at Goodleap did a magnificent job with Safe Harbor. You look at what Everbright did. Everbright was the first company to Safe Harbor in 24. Like, that was brilliant and smart, and they were ahead of everyone. And you even think about Enfin, even though with all of their struggles, they've done a great job safe harboring, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the rest of 25 and 26. Like, they have given us the runway till 29 or 30. And like, we owe a debt of gratitude to that group of leaders in our industry.
Yeah, no, that's good to point out. And, we talk about how long it's going to take to rebound or things to get back to normal, or maybe they're never back the way they were, but to be in some realm of normalcy. And that's not even considering what may happen with interest rates, right? Like, people don't talk about this right now, but they have to come down at some point, you would think, in the next year or so. And if they do, what sort of impact do you think that would have on solar financing?
It's a huge positive. Interest rates go down. All right. That means EPCs are going to go up. Like, there's a direct correlation. And a lot of people think that interest rates only affect loans. That's just, everybody is borrowing money. Everyone is paying an interest rate. If it comes down, your cost of capital is less, you can pay more as an EPC. And we are going to get back to a very competitive market where you're going to have 3 or 4 TPOs that are vying for these projects. And as interest rates go down, that will flow through to the EPCs. I'm very confident of that.
Yeah, that's just another thing that I think, we're not talking about today, but I expect us to be talking about that in the coming months. So, well, thank you so much, Brett. I think there is a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be looking forward to. And just a huge, I guess, sigh of relief, at least for residential solar. We went through a lot of ups and downs. There was a lot of uncertainty. And like you said, I don't think everybody's out of the woods yet by any means. But it just seems like now we know we have a path. Everybody can kind of relax a little bit and just get back to what we were doing so we can focus on building our business and establishing this industry. So thank you for joining us, Brett. Any final comments?
No, that's it. It's a good day. And I haven't been able to say that in many, many weeks, because it seems like every day there's a new crisis, and just today's been a great day for our industry. Very encouraged.
That it has been. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Brett, for taking the time. This is the Solar Disruption Theory podcast, and we will see you guys on the next episode.
Thanks.